Ask anyone whether President Trump will run again in 2024, and you'll get answers ranging from no, hell no, to yes, hell yes, or no, he shouldn't, yes, he should, and I don't know, but if he does, it'll be wonderful, or it will be very disruptive. If you ask people in Washington, D.C., many say, this city will explode. I don't know whether he'll run again, but I do know he's raising a lot of money. And I do know that should the Republicans take the House and the Senate this November, those wins will factor in heavily into his decision. Those wins will set the Republican stage for him. There are other factors too, and one of them is Special Counsel John Durham's probe, which is getting more interesting by the day. Durham is investigating the predicate as to why we had a Robert Mueller investigation in the first place. And Trump has always said about all of this that his campaign was spied on. And now we know through the latest filing by Special Counsel John Durham that not only was his campaign spied on, but he was spied on while he was in the Oval. These things he told the nation, which the mainstream media, of course, did not report or stated, they just weren't true, but they are true. They're very true. So, will Trump run? And if so, who will be his running mate? I'm Terry Gilberg, and this is Timeline with Terry. Today's Timeline topic, will 45 become 47? I'll be right back.
You're watching Conservative Television of America, working hard to stick socialism where the sun don't shine.
Welcome to Red Balloon, the nation's first and only free speech job site. I'm Andrew, the founder and CEO, and I'm excited you're here. I called this service Red Balloon because balloons help you fly, especially if you tie a ton of them to a lawn chair. A little bit dangerous, a lot bit fun, kind of like looking for a new job. The mission of Red Balloon is to connect employers who still love freedom and want employees who love freedom to the millions of Americans now searching for jobs today, where they won't have to look over their shoulders and constantly be worried about being canceled. There are over 10 million open jobs today, the most in history, people. It's kind of a moment. I always wanted to provide a job site focused on introducing employers to employees who will be focused on job performance and work and not politics. Come on, America. Stop canceling each other. Let's get to work. Visit redballoon.work. We'd love to have you.
All right, guys, you have signed up, right? You've joined freedomsquare.com. If you haven't, why not? This should have happened a decade ago. How did somebody not think of this earlier? If you're a business owner, we have a business directory to promote your business to patriots across the nation. So if you want to buy American, if you want to sell American, we have a business directory. Whatever it is, go now.
Join us in the fight for freedom. Welcome to Freedom Square.
Welcome back to Timeline with Terry. This is the show where we invite expert guests to share what they know in simple speak on the complex issues of our day. As per Trump, he hasn't gone away. He's still doing rallies and media, and he has set up his own media and technology company. It appears that he's on the campaign trail raising a lot of money, but nobody is really certain at this stage if he'll run again. Only Trump knows that. And he's probably waiting to see how the midterms go before he really knows or really decides. Ann Stone is with me here in the studio to weigh in on this question and to review the first 4 years of the Trump presidency. She's the former wife of the famous Republican mover and shaker Roger Stone, and she's the founder or co-founder of Women for Trump. She's a mover and shaker in Republican politics herself. Hello, Ann. Nice to have
Hello.
you.
So great to be here, Terry. Thank you.
Well, I'm delighted that you came into the studio. We have better powwows when people come in. Enough with the Skype, right?
Right.
So let's get right to it. We're going to talk about Trump. When he came down the escalator the first time, I went, wow, look at that. The frump of the Trump. Big man coming down, big announcement. Now, will he run again? Yes or no?
I think he will. Unless something takes a turn for the worse in his health, I definitely think he will.
Uh-huh. And you think he will, why, when he hasn't even made a move one way or the other?
Well, he is making moves. The money that they've raised, he's sitting on over $120 million.
Is that it?
Yeah,
Wow.
more than the Republicans and Democrats combined. He's out there actively working in campaigns, endorsing a couple times double endorsing candidates. Candidates are seeking him out. He's very active. He is very much still a presence. And I was in Salt Lake City, for the RNC, the famous RNC winter meeting where they passed the censure resolution. And it was interesting because a majority on the actual national committee are not for Trump. It's a very small but very vocal group of us that still support him very strongly. But yet the censure was put out there as being, this is Trump's influence on the Republican Party, because the people in Washington are idiots and they don't bother to look as to why the censure was actually passed. It was actually passed more as a Republican measure than even a pro-Trump measure. It just happens that it intersected with something he'd like to see as well.
So let's go back just a little bit before we talk about the censure. You think he'll run, and you think he's making moves accordingly.
Yes.
What I think the naked eye sees, and people that aren't in politics and don't do what we do, they may know he's raising money, but they don't see the nuance, the moves. What are the moves they should be seeing that you see?
Well, again, if anybody has a cell phone and they've ever contributed anything to anything around Trump, you're getting messages daily, and that's one part of the
That's a
success.
sign.
One part of the success.
Okay.
Secondly, again, the activity that he has in terms of being out there for candidates, and he started his rallies again. Look at his rallies.
The rallies are-
Arizona, 30,000 people. Texas, 80,000 people. Oh my Lord! That's
They're
more
omnipresent,
than,
aren't
well, that's
they?
more than Biden and Harris had the entire campaign combined.
Yeah, they're
Unbelievable.
very
bigger-
impressive, that's
they're
true.
bigger than last time. It's unbelievable. People have a tremendous respect for, if you're not in the media and you're not in the left, have a tremendous respect for the man because of the sacrifices that he and his family made to run for office. I mean, he sacrificed wealth, he sacrificed reputation, he certainly sacrificed peace because he got attacked so virulently and so strongly day after day after day for just doing something he thought was in the best interest of the country.
When I booked you for this and we had a pre-interview and a great chat, we talked maybe 45 minutes to an hour on this subject. And I said, Ann, we got to get you on air so a national audience can hear it. And where we were at when I made that decision to invite you, you were laying out what you think is currently unfinished business, for lack of another description,
Absolutely.
on what Trump needs to sew up. For example, I mentioned in the open, the Durham probe. It's a criminal investigation. He's got tremendous power to bring a number of indictments. We've seen 3 so far. Maybe another one will be coming, and the dominoes will fall. Who knows? But just on the Durham stuff alone and Russiagate, that's unfinished business, big time. So
my
take us
Lord.
through some unfinished business in these segments.
Well,
that
what's
we-
interesting is, the critics and the skeptics are saying, well, Durham stuff, these indictments, they're little guys, it doesn't matter. No. He's methodically laying out the case. It's getting closer and closer and closer, not only to Hillary Clinton, but to Barack Obama. We know from this
How do
latest...
you know it's going right to Barack
Well,
Obama?
because
How
from
can
this,
you
latest,
tell?
from this latest filing,
I see.
there is evidence, there's written evidence that Obama was briefed. He and Clinton, all these people knew that this whole push on Russiagate was a creation of the Clinton campaign, whether you call it a dirty trick, a prank, or you call it espionage. And at this point, sedition, since we now know from his filing and yet to be adjudicated, but
Right.
It's alleged that Clinton campaign operative was in cahoots with a vendor who had access to White House servers, and Trump was being spied on in the White House
Right.
after he was
In
president.
The White House.
I'm sorry, isn't that espionage? Isn't that treason? It certainly is sedition. They were
It
doing
is
all this
sedition.
to undermine the president. Unbelievable. So from that standpoint alone, how else are we going to get the security apparatus across government, whether it be CIA, FBI, NSA, NSC, all of that, cleaned out? I mean, if there are people that were actually conducting this campaign against Trump while he was candidate and then while he was president, that whole thing has to be cleaned out. There are clearly partisan operatives that are in there that are going to undermine any Republican that comes into office. I think Trump is the only one with the cojones to actually get in there and do it and clean out. And he learned a very valuable lesson in the first go-round. He learned, and he knew this from business, that personnel is policy. But he trusted people to help him staff. That's not a mistake the man would make again. This time it's going to be loyalists. And a lot of us loyalists, were people who tried to get into the administration. We were blocked by people in personnel that were old Bush people that kept the Trump people out.
Okay, hold on to your thought right
Okay.
there, because I want you to take us through many of the pieces of the unfinished business.
Okay.
Because I think that goes to why Trump should run,
Yes.
whether or not you like his personality or not. But let me take you back. You said, well, he can get in there and clean it up.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't that John Durham's job to disclose this through indictments, take people through trials, have them squeal? I'm sure a number are lawyered up as we speak and tape this show. And really expose this. That is his job, because that's the first part of the cleanup,
That
right,
is the
Ann?
first part, but he doesn't have the capability of cleaning out the civil service folks. And
So your
Trump
point
will
is
not-
that Trump should run to then get in office again, to be elected, to get in office, to then do that addendum to what Durham is doing presently.
find the partisans and all of the intelligence community, and while he may not be able to fire a lot of them because of civil service regulations, he can certainly banish them to Siberia. I mean, literally, send them to Alaska to field offices or whatever, but get them out of where they are now and bring people in. The American people rightly have lost a lot of faith in the FBI and the CIA and
Indeed.
in our intelligence community
Indeed.
because they've been told lie after lie after lie. And think about it. Don't you wish that Glenn Kessler, who's the fact checker for the Washington Post, would go back through that infamous 30,000 lies Trump told, which weren't 30,000 lies. It was, probably maybe 1,000 things they claimed were lies, that every time Trump repeated it, they counted as a separate lie. Go back and check those 1,000 lies, because what we know now, most of what they claim were lies were absolutely not. They were, the conventional wisdom's belief about Trump, which now history and facts have proven to be true, like Trump being spied on, which they said was one of the big lies. Whenever I talk about the fact checking too, I have to throw in, that one of the facts that he got dinged on was when he had the sports figures in during the shutdown of the government, and he had to order fast food because the White House
Oh, I
cooks-
remember that, yeah.
And
Yeah, I
they
remember.
said he was lying when he said that the hamburgers were piled a mile high. That was one of the facts.
Let's hope they are, because sports figures eat a lot.
But I always love to throw that out to show you how stupid that whole 30,000
Was that Washington
lies
Post?
thing. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
Back to the Virginia Tech executive number one. Okay, in the Durham filing, just for our audience, in case our audience doesn't know, there was one mentioned, a man, a woman, we don't know, Virginia Tech-1 person, who has now been revealed as Rodney Joffe. All right. He's apparently the CEO of a Virginia tech company that was allegedly, reportedly, assumed, hired by the Clinton campaign through Perkins Coie to get in there and spy in the Oval Office and all through the White House.
Right, and
But you
Perkins
can't-
Coie being the law firm that did a lot of the
Thank
Clinton
you.
campaign.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. All right. So they're all in, that's all the Clinton camp. You can't do that without the help of the FBI.
One would
right?
think. One would
Or
think.
am I wrong on that, Ann?
No, one would think not just the FBI. You'd have to have a lot of complicity within the structure for this guy to be getting away with what he's getting away
Part
with.
of the administration, part of the rhinos within the White House,
It probably is not the appointed people that Trump had at the time. It probably was the in-place civil servants. Obama at the end of his term had a lot of people convert and stay in the government because they assumed Trump was a fluke, and then 4 years later they'd be back in again. So they had a lot of people convert. In fairness, our people do too, but our people don't like working for the government, so not as many of our people convert as they do. Democrats see government work as more of a vocation. We see it as an avocation.
and so that begs the question, anybody there administratively indicted, in your view?
Possibly. I mean, this net, it's going to be interesting as this net continues to be thrown out, because I think we've only begun to see. I want to see Steph Halper brought back to this country. I want to find out what Steph knows. I mean, I know Steph. I've known him for years, and frankly, the man would do just about anything for money. So it'd be interesting to get him back in this country to find out exactly what they paid him. I think it was about $1 million in 3 different cases to do things related to the Russia hoax.
There's another name that was brought up just yesterday, Mark Ellis. Your take?
Again, I think having his name out there makes the Democrats very nervous. He knows where a lot of the bodies are buried. So it's going to, again, be very interesting. And everybody out there is frustrated because they want the big names. They want Hillary Clinton to be dragged off in chains. They want Barack Obama locked up. There's just a lot of people under them that are going to have to be uncovered first. And some of the people that Durham's going after first are turning, which is how they're going to get more and more. But, what was it, the infamous Susan Rice memo that she wrote as a CYA the day of Trump's inauguration? Everything we did by the book. Really? What was it you did by the book, Susan? Let's see which book you were using, because I'm not sure it was anything to do with the U.S. Constitution. So it's going to be very interesting to see.
And just on that note, I do recall her working during the inauguration
Yes.
itself,
Yeah.
putting things down by the book, almost as a
It's called CYA.
A CYA, yes. So the Durham piece is one piece of unfinished business. All right, and we'll see how that unfolds. Give us another piece of unfinished business.
Well, first of all, now one big unfinished piece is going to be going back and undoing what Biden has undone of Trump's that was working so well. I mean, Biden is so dumb. He doesn't understand so many things he did within his first week of, anything Trump had to go actually is part of why the economy's gotten trashed. So Trump's first cleanup is going to be to go ahead and reinstate a lot of the stuff that he did do in his first term. And the good news is he's been there, he's done it, he'll be able to do it very quickly, and his people will know what to do. And the great thing is Trump has sort of a administration in exile through the America First Policy Institute. He has a lot of his people that are in that orbit, and they're there still researching things, investigating, putting together legislative priorities and all that. So Trump's going to definitely be able to come back in and hit the ground running. But there are so many other things he wanted to do. He had the Abraham Accords, and for people out there that don't know, he had negotiated peace accords between Israel and 4 Arab countries, and further, he actually negotiated an end to the conflict between Serbia and Kosovo. Huge, huge. People since Clinton
People do
had
not
been.
know that,
I
yeah.
know.
They know zip
We're
about
talking
that.
about 1,000 years of them fighting, and Trump did something that Clinton, Obama, and Bush had all tried to do and failed by bringing the countries together, because he went in with fresh eyes as a businessman. He said, all right, you guys are going like this. How about we look over here, look over here? What is it over here that maybe would be in your interest to bring into this mix? And it was economics. And he got them together through economic cooperation, which benefited both countries and made it common sense for them to get together. He has that, and then he has so many other pieces of the economic stuff that he wanted to do, that's not yet there. Truly real continued permanent tax reform, which he did the partial, and they say, the Trump tax cut is why we have inflation. No, it's not at all. So in fact, we know revenues went up under Trump, not down. If if tax reform and this tax cut was causing inflation, tax revenues would not have gone up. They
While
definitely
we're on
did.
this thread, I'm also reminded of black unemployment. That was
And
very, very big.
Latino
and Latino
unemployment.
unemployment, right. And what he did on the international stage, too, we'll pick up on the backside of this break. That was, getting across the demarcation line was a feat, even if it was with Little Rocket Man. Okay. This is Timeline with Terry. I'm Terry Gilberg. I'm delighted to have Ann Stone in studio, chewing the fat on all things Trump. I appreciate it, again, you coming in. We'll be right back after this break.
CTA is a call to action to all conservatives to save America from left-wing radicals.
Nearly 45% of the U.S. workforce already have plans for job hopping in 2021. Now, many of those 70 million job hoppers are just fed up, and they're ready to work somewhere else, somewhere where they will be free. Maybe it's time for your talents to go to a city or a company that actually values your freedom. Post your resume on redballoon.org so that you can connect with this ever-growing list of free speech employers who would love to hire you.
All right, guys, you have signed up, right? You've joined freedomsquare.com. If you haven't, why not? This should have happened a decade ago. How did somebody not think of this earlier? If you're a business owner, we have a business directory to promote your business to patriots across the nation. So if you want to buy American, if you want to sell American, we have a business directory. Whatever it is, go now.
Join us in the fight for freedom. Welcome to Freedom Square.
We're back on Timeline with Terry. I'm Terry Gilberg. We're talking with Ann Stone. We like to give time to our guests. This isn't a show about sound bites, so you can really delve into the hot topics of the day. And what we are presenting on this Timeline topic today is whether or not President Trump will run. Ann Stone says he should run, regardless of what you think about his personality. We've been going through the unfinished business, John Durham, the economy, international stuff. I was blown away when he crossed the demarcation line in North Korea. I was also more subtly blown away with how he kept Putin at bay. And look at the conflict now with Ukraine. And then there's, of course, President Xi. Pick up on the international piece.
Well, Trump turned out, contrary to what many of the defense community feared, to be very adept at dealing with people. And of course, the big thing was, he wants to do it with NATO. No, he wants NATO to be responsible. He wants our allies to stop taking advantage of America and start paying their fair share, which they had to do. And
Correct.
finally stepped up. Others said they were going to make them do it, other presidents, and Trump was the first one to actually do it. Trump scared our friends, but more importantly, he scared our adversaries.
Enemies,
And
yes.
as Richard Nixon once told me, one of the great strengths he had was the Chinese never quite knew what to expect of him, and the Russians the same thing. And behind closed doors, he said he would always act just a little crazy, so that they would never
Put
quite
him
know
off
how
guard.
far they could push him.
And that's a good thing.
Yes, it's a very good thing. And with Trump, the media, if Trump wasn't doing it, the media was making them think he was, that he would be so unpredictable and flighty and the finger on the button and watch it and all that. And that actually helped him when it came to dealing with both our friends and our adversaries, because he was feared. Biden is laughed at. Biden is so weak and so pathetic. They look at Putin. I mean, he just feels he's playing him tremendously. I'm not sure if he'll attack Ukraine or not, but the point is he's getting everything he wants short of attacking Ukraine. He's getting all the attention, and probably will end up with concessions from our allies as a result of what's going on. He would never have dared push that with Trump at all. And for somebody who was supposed to be Putin's puppet, Putin definitely was nervous about Trump. Trump treated him with respect, but he also treated him with strength. And we actually did more against the Russians than the public ever knew in terms of sanctions and, the time he threw the diplomats out and all of that. He was very strong with Putin and all of our adversaries. I love the story in Afghanistan, too, where Biden says, we were just following the Trump withdrawal plan. Baloney, total baloney. What Trump did in Afghanistan was he understood you have to do the deal with the guy that can do the deal. And the people that we helped put into Afghanistan to run it before we withdrew were so weak, he knew they could never hold the ground by themselves. He had to do a deal with the guys with the guns, and that was the Taliban. Mm-hmm. But when he sat down with the Taliban, he looked at the guy who was the leader, and he said, I understand you're the leader. And he basically pointed his finger at the guy and said, you come from, and he names the guy's village. And he said, let me tell you this, any American gets killed, that village gets attacked first, we'll wipe it off the face of the earth. And the guy's like, that's why no Americans were killed until Biden came into office. They were terrified of Trump. And that's good. That's a good thing when you're dealing with crazy people with guns. And his planned withdrawal from Afghanistan was totally different. It was conditions-based. And when the Taliban, during the preliminary period, did things that were contrary to what the agreement was, the Trump folks did pull back and would start bombing again and would start activities again. And then the Taliban would say, okay, fine, and they'd go back to the agreement again. So Trump showed them, you go by your word, you break your word, we'll come down on you like a ton of bricks. Yeah. Biden's people, idiots, didn't know, just the whole thing fell apart. But that was good for us in the sense that it really did disclose to the American people very quickly that Biden and his so-called experienced adults in the room were morons. And for all their foreign policy experience, they didn't know how to do this at all.
So Afghanistan, mess. Ukraine and Putin, that's a mess. It could be President Xi attacking Taiwan. And both of these may be going on at the same time.
Yep.
How will Biden handle that?
Unfortunately, probably badly. And so that's what's really scary. We'll see. I'd like to see if the defense community will stand up to Biden like they constantly threatened they were going to stand up to Trump. What could these guys that were so afraid of Trump be thinking now, within our own defense community? Like, gee, maybe we did make a mistake? Trump's got to look better to them now.
Another piece of unfinished business, I think, is that last year when Trump was in office and we had the crisis of COVID, not to mention BLM and Antifa and all of that, and the killing of George Floyd, all of that. But let's concentrate on COVID for just a minute. It's my feeling, perhaps through no fault of his own, that Trump got snookered on the COVID thing. What do I mean by that? I mean, Fauci took the microphone every single day and flipped and flopped, but he had that position of authority, and Trump was listening, naturally. He's the great Dr. Anthony Fauci. What Trump didn't do, and I was waiting for it to happen, is for equal time given to an economist. Here, Fauci is the big doctor of the land, but while he is doctoring the land, our economy is sinking. For the sake of the sick, everybody else is unhealthy, including the entire economy. I think Trump got a little mesmerized by Dr. Fauci, and it wasn't until later when he established the task force with Mike Pence and brought in others to kind of investigate what Fauci was saying, a little bit tardy, and Birx as well, but he needed to give ample time to economists or financial people, give them the mic, and describe to the American public, look we've got a problem on both ends. He did say, to his advantage, I thought, the cure may be worse than the disease. Comment on what you thought with regard to the coronavirus was already here before we knew how to react. So we were reactive to it. But I don't think he got his sea legs on this because of Fauci. I think he got snookered. What's your take?
Well, I don't know if I'd call it snookered by Fauci, but he definitely was taken in almost to the point of like Powell and Bush did to us with WMD with
That's
Iraq
a great
War.
analogy.
I mean,
yes,
about
Powell
the-
did do that.
Yeah, it's about the same
And to
thing.
the United
Well,
Nations.
Well, he would say that Powell would say he was snookered too, that he was given bad information too. But understand this is bigger than the U.S. The information was coming in, false information was coming in from international groups that were doing studies and making projections. And then you had the University of Washington folks making projections as to what would happen if lockdowns didn't happen, all this stuff didn't happen. We're talking about millions and millions of people would die immediately. So all of that turned out to be very bad information with models that were based on false information. Right. But even the most loyal people around him, Trump, were panicked because they understood that, you know, if you had a disease that apparently in the beginning they were claiming was going to be much more virulent and deadly than it turned out to be, with a higher percentage being affected, and that you had a problem with the hospitals being shut down and overrun, and remember we were going to be out of ventilators, and, you know, if you look back to the
PPE.
beginning as to what the real needs were that we were going to be short of, it all turned out to be false. We ended up with excess ventilators because we didn't need as many as they thought, and the hospitals were never overrun. Did the 15-day original slow down to flatten the curve, not stop the disease, but flatten the curve to allow the healthcare industry to sort of catch up? Was that necessary? Look at Sweden. Look at some other places
Look at
around
Africa.
Yeah, look. And some would say there because they take anti-malaria medicine. That's one of the reasons they were never
That
as
old
yeah,
hydroxychloroquine.
we're never as deadly.
Which isn't
there.
which isn't a horse
Well,
dewormer.
again, I know. Ivermectin, yeah. Some of the medications they take for disease over there may be part of it, and also the intense sunlight, because vitamin D is another thing that we know
Works
keeps
to
it down.
keep it at
keeps
bay.
it down. So anyway, Trump was not in the field of his expertise, and he was being told that there were millions of people that were going to die immediately if he didn't do something. So you can understand. I mean, contrary to those who think Trump has no feeling, he has got a big, warm heart, and he certainly didn't want to see millions of people die in his watch. But he also, very early on, recognized that prolonged shutdowns were the wrong way to go. And if you might remember, he started pushing fairly early as summer, to say, you know, maybe we need to start pulling back a little bit, and, you know, we do have to balance, and we have to look at what are the other things that are going to happen to people because of these lockdowns.
I even think it was before summer, because I recall the national lockdown came around March 15th.
Yeah, it was about May.
And Easter, but Easter was around April 15th.
Yeah.
And he did say, because
say-
it stuck with me, he said, wouldn't it be nice if we could lift these lockdowns by Easter time? Springtime, you know, everybody's
Right,
out again.
right.
And he got rotten tomatoes thrown
Well,
at him.
yeah, all they said is, oh, you know, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just, Trump by nature is very optimistic. So he's always going to see that the end has got to be there, and things have got to get better more quickly. And he wanted to always put the best face on things, because he also understood you scare people, you're going to make it worse. But in fact, the Democrats deal in fear. Republicans deal in optimism. And that's why Trump has always naturally been more of a Republican than a Democrat. And unfortunately, the fear, it was too easy to believe the worst, because our media promoted that. They promoted the fear invective.
And the angst and the biting of the nails,
Yeah.
and 1.9 to 2.1 million people are going to die like
Right.
that. Why? Because we've got modelers that say it.
And again, they turned
And it's
out
Johns
to be,
Hopkins.
and they turned out to be false.
Right.
And Anderson from University of Washington.
Again, under this theme of unfinished business, if he does run, how will he finish up the COVID issue? Because he pushed vaccines. He wanted a vaccine under his watch, and it was warp speed, or whatever the term
Yeah,
was.
it was warp
and it
speed.
came, but now we know something about these synthetic
know that-
serums.
yeah, we know that
they're not a real vaccine.
We know the vaccines
how will he
have
shore that
problems.
up and
I think
manage that?
I think what he would say is he'd probably look at what kind of structure needs to be put in place to plan for the next one, and he would fully vet out and figure out what else has to be done in terms of the vaccine or preventive. And now I think we know it's going to be a shot, probably like the flu shot every year, to prevent if you feel
Or
you're
a
going to
pill.
you're going to be susceptible to this kind of COVID. And again, remember, COVID's been out there in various forms. We've had several different waves of different COVIDs for decades.
Sure.
It's not just this one. So I think you would see him take a business approach to it, and again, try to figure out, first of all, bring back a lot of the stuff in the supply chain for healthcare back to the U.S. That's something he started. That is a piece of his unfinished business. That's something he started while he was president, to start to bring things back, because he was horrified to find out China was the main supplier of so much of the PPE. I mean, he couldn't believe that we ever allowed our country to get to that point where we were so beholden to China for things like that. So I think that is a big piece of the unfinished business.
And more on the unfinished business, the follow-up to holding China's feet to the fire.
Oh,
I mean, where
yes,
are the
that's a
Western
biggie.
nations
Yeah.
linking arms with the United States? Or do we have to go this alone and create some kind of more Cold War with China, or World War III, as some people say? Oh my God, you can't bring China's feet to the fire. We're going to have, a war worse than World War II.
All of that would have been easier about a month ago. Now, because Russia and China have come
linked
together as an
arms.
axis.
Yes.
I mean,
That's
for
right.
anybody out there that is a student of communist history, you would know that Russia and China used to be linked all the way back in the beginning when they both became communist. And they broke apart, not because they didn't have the same goals, but they had different methods. Russia was always more overt, and China believed in a more covert approach to world domination. But they both wanted world domination. Our worst fear has been them getting back together. And a lot of what Trump was doing, both with North Korea and with Russia and with China, was trying to keep them from joining forces and trying to find ways to keep them apart from each other. Now, thanks to Biden, they've become more tied. And because of the Ukraine crisis, China has found a way to come in and pal around with Putin and build this new alliance, which is not good. So it's going to take somebody like Trump to figure out how do you give them incentives to stop playing so nice with each other and start again playing nice with the U.S.
And you mentioned you mentioned the economy and COVID and how surprised Trump was that we had things like PPE made in China we were running out of, or even ibuprofen, things like that. If Trump runs again and is reelected again and becomes 47, will he push for manufacturing to be done in the United States of America?
He already started to do that when he was 45. He most assuredly would make that a main thing as 47. And you do know why we pushed a lot of our manufacturing off to China. You've heard of
Well,
a
all of the
company.
offshoring, everything that happened in the late 70s and 80s. And
Well, it's more than that. You lay this at the feet of the Democrats as well. You heard of a company called Kinsey and Company,
yes.
which many of the major Democrat operatives,
Yes.
Including people like Buttigieg and Chelsea Clinton and others, come through Kinsey and Company before they go out and do the Democrats' bidding in
Hold on,
legislative
they're
way.
giving me the signal
Okay.
that we have to take a break. Let's pick up on that
Okay.
on the backside. Then we're going to talk about who might he pick as a running mate. There's an interesting question. This is Timeline with Terry. I'm Terry Gilbert, special guest for the full hour, Ann Stone. Used to be married to Roger Stone, but very, very, very much her own Republican mover and shaker. Also was the co-establisher, I guess, co-founder of Women for Trump. I'll be right back.
All right, guys, you have signed up, right? You've joined freedomsquare.com. If you haven't, why not? This should have happened a decade ago. How did somebody not think of this earlier? If you're a business owner, we have a business directory to promote your business to patriots across the nation. So if you want to buy American, if you want to sell American, we have a business directory. Whatever it is, go now.
Join us in the fight for freedom. Welcome to Freedom Square.
back on Timeline with Terry. Today's timeline topic, will 45, meaning President Trump, become 47? Who knows? Ann Stone knows. And we were talking about Kinsey and Company, Chelsea Clinton, Buttigieg, and the push, even as late as the late 70s, to take things offshore.
Yeah.
Wrap that around.
Okay,
again.
they're a management company that many of the largest corporations in the country employ to give them sort of
Consulting
what's the
advice.
future and what should they be doing. And they were a big part of the force behind the push to get a lot of stuff outsourced to China, to move stuff off American shores. A lot of the manufacturing can be directly tied back to their
Get all those
their
factories
advice.
running there. Of course, that was all dovetailed from before,
Right.
as a result of the ping pong with President Nixon, and certainly Bill Clinton pushed for this.
Yeah.
He was probably the president that pushed the most for it. Private equity gets involved pretty soon. Everything we own comes from
Right.
China.
Right.
Well, I do think that if he comes into the office again, holding China's feet to the fire, it should be priority, at least in the top 5.
Oh, he wants reparations.
Immediately. You have to have that.
He definitely wants reparations, certainly write down of anything we owe them. And we owe them, what, a couple trillion now. That's only a small dent in what they've cost us through COVID.
Yeah, I
So-
would think that is a big one
Yeah.
of unfinished business. Running mate. Who would he select as a running? Ann Stone? Would you run with him? I'm kidding.
It's interesting, obviously. Mike Pence, for all of his flaws of maybe not doing everything that Donald Trump wanted, but Pence actually is a really good man. I mean, he's a very honest man, a very good man. It'd be a shame that they wouldn't run together again, but I'm not sure if that bridge can be repaired enough
And that
for them
you're
to do
referring
that.
to the election fraud
Right,
and the
right,
certification.
right.
That's a big, big thing still in the
Right.
news. It's still being
Well, it's a
investigated.
big thing with Trump supporters, and I
Of
think Trump
course.
supporters would not want him
Of
to
course.
choose.
I don't think
because
it's
of
going to
that.
be Pence. Who
Yeah,
else?
again, it's too bad because he is actually a very good man. I think you could see somebody. You're not going to see probably DeSantis because we need him in Florida. You could see Kristi Noem. You could see Tim Scott. That would be an interesting choice. One of the potential Western senators. Possibly, I'm trying to think of who else out there. I think whoever it's going to be is going to be a surprise because Trump tends to do that. I don't think you'd see a Nikki Haley, but that's
Is it
always
too
a
early for
possibility.
Winsome Sears?
Yeah, I think it probably is. But I think Tim Scott is not beyond the pale, actually.
Wouldn't
South
Trump say,
Carolina.
I'm picking a woman? Women are popular today, you know. We are.
We've
Biden's
always
going
been-
for a black woman
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the Supreme Court.
And that's why Kristi Noem from North Dakota would be a possibility. But I think we have a long way to go to see how the electoral map is going to shape out, even though the choice of a running mate doesn't necessarily pretend, that you're going to win that state. I mean, Al Gore didn't win his. I think he's probably going to look for somebody who can ensure that they bring their state along with them. So,
Is Christie ready?
well, she's a governor. I mean, she has more executive
South Dakota.
experience. Yeah,
South Dakota. I
Yeah.
think you said North
Oh,
Dakota.
I'm sorry.
right?
Yeah,
South
yeah.
Dakota. She's very popular.
Mm-hmm.
But people would, the critics would say, well, what's South Dakota after all? It's such a small little hick of a state. But she's done great things in South
Mm-hmm.
Dakota. And she didn't push for lockdown. She didn't push for a lot of masking. She didn't push for kids being shot with.
And I think that's exactly what you're going to find. He's going to find somebody as a mate from one of the red states that did not push for the lockdowns.
Who will other than Biden, that is if Biden can make it, who will the Democrats put up? Or will it be Biden-Harris again?
I don't think they're going to have a choice. They
Really?
have such a narrow bench. I mean, who do they have?
Yeah, who do they have? And if
Look at who
Hillary's
was
in
on the
trouble with the
stage
Durham,
last time.
if Hillary's in trouble with
Yeah,
the
she
Durham,
won't be.
she will be out.
Yeah, Durham may have just ensured that.
So back to the Democrats, Ann. It's Harris or Biden and Harris, and then you say they have nobody else.
Well, if you look at it, Biden is under 50% in approval, and Harris is even lower.
Well, she's yeah.
And again, as you rightly pointed out, Hillary Clinton, because of Durham, is gone now. I really think that would be untenable, where it was not totally unthinkable a month ago. Buttigieg, please. Oh, please. The supply chain is wrapped around his neck. So would you see somebody like an Amy Klobuchar, perhaps? I don't think Elizabeth Warren
again.
I don't think it happens.
Yeah.
I just don't think it happens. Klobuchar actually, although you have the Harris problem of the staff hates them problem, rotten to the staff kind of thing. So I'm not sure who they have that really would have a shot
Would
against
be
Trump.
outstanding.
Right.
Right. So it's Biden and Harris, right?
I guess, or it could be Manchin and Sinema.
Oh, my. Oh, my. Let me wrap my head. Let me process that for a minute. Okay. Let's talk about, let's go back to Durham for just a minute and I want your comments on when people say, well, Durham is also going to uncover the Biden crime family. So we just talked about Biden in office. If Durham uncovers some of the shenanigans with Ukraine and fire the prosecutor Shokin and Victor Shokin and so forth, or you won't get the $1 billion, and these kind of things come up as he is probing the Clinton Foundation and the predicate to the Mueller investigation. There's so many phalanges going on. These tangents just seem to go deep. And in my opinion, that could very well go into the whole world of Jeff Epstein.
Well, there's
because
stuff.
the Clinton Foundation
Yeah.
and all those trips to the Virgin Islands and everything, there's so many layers here, and you've got to pull back the onion. So what about when people say, well, they're going to uncover Durham and his team, they will get to the Biden crime family, and therefore Biden might not have a chance at all to run again.
Well, there are other investigations still ongoing for money laundering when it comes to Hunter, and other things that are being looked in by the Republicans. There's an ongoing investigation on Hunter. So as soon as we come back into power after this November, that's going to be blown up even more. So that is going to put a crimp on Biden.
Are you talking about the
running in
midterms
2024.
coming? You're talking about the midterms.
Yeah.
So that's right around the corner.
After the midterms, the Senate, the Republicans in the Senate and the House have continued to look into the Biden stuff. And for your viewers, understand one of the reasons we don't know everything about Hunter, they had over 127,000 email recovered. There were 3 different devices. There are videos as well as the email. There are text messages, thousands and thousands. This takes time to piece it together. That's one of the reasons we don't have everything there now. But for friends of mine that have had access, I know of people that actually have copies of what were on the original hard drive of one of the devices. The stuff is just amazing. It is so bad. Any other person, as Sarah Carter, I think, calls Hunter Biden the most protected person in D.C., any other person would already be in jail for the stuff that he's done. He's violated so many laws. Unbelievable. Not just financial related, he's violated gun laws, all kinds of stuff.
Well, as this comes to the forefront, how will it hurt President Biden
Well,
in terms of running again?
for the part that he played in terms of covering for his son and also profiting. There are joint accounts.
Sure,
there
they
are places
profited.
where
Oh, sure.
Hunter was paying his bills for him.
Oh, sure.
Supposedly, arrangement of about 10%
The
of the
big
money.
guy.
Yeah,
The big
went
guy.
to Biden. On his salary to have the residence and have the lifestyle that he had while he was the short time he was out of office. Yeah, something doesn't track.
Let me fast forward now to how January 6th committee, the committee investigating January 6th through the House of Representatives under Nancy Pelosi. I saw a quote, "The Trump haters are desperate. Whether he runs or not, it's important to maintain Trump policies of working for the middle class, cultivating economic growth, defending free markets, etc., streamlining the welfare state, in other words, substitute for jobs." But the Pelosi committee is right now looking, using 14 prosecutors. I didn't know there were that many. And yet, the House of Representatives has zero power to prosecute anybody. But it's all for show and so forth. And then with this, we've got Mitch McConnell saying it absolutely was a violent insurrection. I was very surprised that he's a violent insurrection, really, when Capitol Police were saying, sure, come on in, come on in, come on in. Anyway, FBI head Director Christopher Wray actually said shortly after January 6th that the incident In this incident, he found no connection between the vandals and and Trump or Trump's campaign. Okay, how will the whole January 6th thing play out between now and the midterms? And then how will that then play out toward 2024? Because Pelosi still has people in jail. They haven't had a hearing. Many that have never been convicted of a crime before. That too is a mess. January 6th.
January 6th, armed insurrection. How many
Really?
people had arms? There was like one guy, a DEA guy, that had a concealed carry. How do you have an insurrection? How do you overthrow the government if you're not armed? I mean, it's just ludicrous. And we had, several 100,000 people were in town that day to celebrate Trump and go to his speech. And a few hundred went up to Capitol Hill.
I think it was estimated about 125 to 150.
And 700 have been arrested just because they were in town, even if they weren't anywhere near the Capitol or ever went into the Capitol. This has been the biggest stain on democracy. January 6th wasn't the problem with undermining democracy. The aftermath, the way Pelosi has handled herself, is what is the stain. There has never been, in the history of the House, a tradition of one side choosing the members when you have these bipartisan commissions, ever. She is the first to break it. And the fact that she refused to accept the Republicans' people on the committee was because it was intended for political theater. She wanted to have total control of the narrative, and she never wanted the narrative to include her. What will happen after the midterms? This thing will play out up to the midterms. The good news is the American people are not stupid. They understand this is BS. It does not affect their lives. And they say what we always say. What about the riots we had all summer where more people were killed, people's lives were destroyed, their businesses looted, burned down, houses burned down, all that. The American people were saying, hey, that affected me and my family more than what went on January 6th. What are you talking about here? You didn't care at all about that. That was a peaceful protest that we can see the flames in the background. So from that standpoint, the American people once again have shown they're a lot smarter than the Democrats give them credit for. What's going to happen after the midterms, after there's the red tsunami in the midterms? The Republicans will deal with January 6th. If they take it forward, it will be to include investigating Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats and what they knew and why the guy who planted the bomb, who they have video of, who they see him on a cell phone nearby, nobody's made any attempt to identify him. Cell phone! FBI! You can find that person right away. This is nuts. So there's something very fishy there. And then the things that we know now about, in some parts of around the Capitol, the police were letting people in, and they were very
saw
friendly.
video on that.
Yeah, and the protesters are taking selfies with the police and stuff like that. So from that standpoint, January 6th, if it does go forward past the midterms, it's going to be to see what part Pelosi and folks really did play in leaving the Capitol so unsafe. We know the president authorized for the National Guard to be called up, and Muriel Bowser, the Democrat mayor of the lousy Democrat mayor of D.C., and Nancy Pelosi said no, they didn't want the Guard there.
Well, I also remember, too, on that note, she did say she didn't want the Guard there, that Trump had asked prior to make it, let's approach the Capitol, peaceful protest,
Right.
where he encouraged
Right.
it really from the podium, but he had asked for the Capitol Police to have reinforcements.
Yes. Yes.
He had asked that.
Yes.
Now, if you're
planning an insurrection.
if you're planning an insurrection, you're not going to be asking for
Again,
that.
The biggest problem, and if we have to close on this note, it's a good one. The biggest problem in this country is we are operating in two different worlds of information. And if you talk to people on the left, and I talk to friends who are Democrats, God bless them, they have no clue of any of the stuff that you've talked about today. And programs like yours are so important because you bring forward information that the average American doesn't get.
If they listen.
Right.
If they
well,
listen.
that's true. But the Democrats aren't getting any of this information. Go and have a conversation with a Democrat and ask them about some of this stuff. Ask them even about the latest Durham filing. They haven't even heard about it. They have not heard
They
that
don't
we now know.
the average American doesn't know who John Durham is.
Right. But they certainly haven't heard then that Trump truly was spied on, not only as a candidate, but he was spied out in the White House.
And there's people like Adam Schiff and even Leslie Stahl that need to come forward and say, we were wrong and we apologize.
In the old days, I used to say, "Tell me what Operation Crossfire Hurricane is," and they go, "Huh? What?"
Or Crossfire Razor.
Yeah, but
Mike Flynn.
Yeah, but you tell them about Crossfire Hurricane, and they're like, "How come we don't know that?" And I said, "Well, what do you read? What do you watch? That's why."
Yeah.
And I said, "You ought to be bold, be daring, and try looking at Tucker and Sean and Laura a couple
just
nights.
listen if you can't watch them.
Or The Five, or Jesse Waters, or whatever. Just a couple times, just to get a flavor, or turn on Newsmax at any point during the day, and listen to you."
Well, thank you. And as more of these indictments, which I do think are coming through John Durham's office, the left media, the left-leaning media, they can't help but cover it.
They're gonna
They
have to.
cover
Yeah.
it. And I personally think there needs to be apologies on the part of 60 Minutes, Leslie Stahl, that took President Trump on, saying there's no evidence of
the
this.
wiretapping. They mocked him.
And he
They
said,
mocked him.
I know. And he said, you didn't investigate the
Right.
60 Minutes, the great
Right.
60 Minutes. Didn't. And then
Right.
there's Adam Schiff.
And that's a big, he needs to go away. But there's a big problem with the media not being able to eat but so much crow. I mean, they already had to on Mueller. They look like such idiots. How do you turn to your audience and say, we screwed up for the last 5 years. We've just basically been lying by omission. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, they did a little bit of that with Chris Cuomo when he was off the air. But that's a tough thing to do. I mean, the hubris is pretty thick and deep. Final thoughts, because I know we have to wrap.
Well, again, as I said, the biggest problem in this country today is the lack of real information getting to everybody in the country. Certainly there's a group of us that go out and investigate and look for the stuff and have the benefit of being able to talk to folks like you, but there's so much that's being hidden. And you can't have a democracy when half the country doesn't even know what's going on. I mean, that's the biggest threat to democracy, is lack of information. And getting social media to stop censoring free speech, that's going to have to be another big focus of Trump. And I certainly trust him a lot more to go after social media and restore our first speech rights.
Right. And if he does run, quick question, you will head up Women for Trump again, yes or no?
Well, I certainly will be involved. I founded the council in 2016. In 2020, I served as an advisor. In 2024, we'll see. There's a lot of things I'd like to help him with, and I hope he'll ask.
And you do think he's going to run?
I certainly hope so.
Yeah. So nice having you on the show.
Thank you.
And I hope you come back. We'll continue on because there's a lot to cover.
Sure enough.
Ann Stone has been my special guest. That's it for this edition of Timeline with Terry. I'm Terry Gilbert. We'll see you tomorrow on another Timeline topic.